Welcome into the All One podcast. Once again, thank you so much for pushing play. I'm your host, Michael Admire, and we are back with another All One-on-One. And our guest today is Dwana Bradley. She's a school board member for the Des Moines Public Schools, publisher of the Urban Experience, senior ambassador of the John D. Bright College at Drake University, and the executive director of Iowa's Juneteenth celebration. Now you may be asking yourself, that's it? Of course not. She's so much more, a positive ray of light in the Des Moines community and an unapologetic promoter and lifter of the Black community. I think we had a really good conversation about some of the news that she recently made by some comments she had on local television, where she said that every time her son leaves her house, that she fears for his life. We also talk about her upbringing. Her father is a pastor, a self-made journalist, and community activist, and Dwana has followed so gracefully in his footsteps. With that, here we go.
All One is a collaborative group
of coaches and staff
dedicated to making the Drake athletic community
a safe, equitable,
just, and welcoming environment
for Black,
Indigenous,
people of color,
LGBTQ+,
differently abled,
and all marginalized populations.
My name is Danny Bugg, and I am the Assistant Director of Athletics Marketing.
Lindsay Horner, head women's soccer coach.
Gareth Smith, head men's soccer coach.
I'm Michael Admire, Director of Broadcasting.
Miley Tran, Drake women's tennis head coach.
Tara Armstrong, athletic trainer.
Stephanie Sledge, Associate Athletic Director for Student Athlete Success.
Rachel Pruitt-Hornbaker, head women's golf coach.
Bryant Wright, Manager of Business Development for Drake Sports Properties.
Dwana Bradley, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited about having you here across the table and just having this conversation because we share a few things in common, a little bit of a journalism background, but then what has brought us here today is the love of conversation. What's your favorite part of this art form?
I just love getting to know people, because what we do is we look at people and we see the decisions they make or the actions that they take, and we figure that we know who they are until we really sit down and, just look at them from across the table, hear their story, and then you're like, for me, sometimes I go, well, how dare you think that about this person? They're going through this or they're experiencing that. And so that's what I love. The beauty of the conversation is I get to understand and learn your reality and, what you're dealing with and what you're going through, and kind of learn you outside of maybe the space I'm familiar with you in. And I know for me, I'm in several different spaces. And so I want people to, let's sit down and talk to each other, even if we disagree or we don't see things eye to eye. It's the conversation that we can walk away with and go, well, that was pretty darn neat. I learned something new about this person. I hope people learn something new, about me with each conversation that I have. And I think that's the beauty of it. And we just don't do it enough. I grew up, you talk to people. Now we're texting and emailing, and I'm trying to figure out if you're mad or happy. And so why not just have the conversation at the table?
And there isn't the sarcastic font on Twitter or
Exactly.
Facebook or any of the social media sites. So it's really hard to truly understand where somebody's coming from through just 140 characters.
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested where your love of conversation came from. Did it come from your dad?
It did. So my dad is a pastor, but he grew up and he actually was a shoe salesman for quite a while. Worked for Yonkers back in the day, and so he always could talk to people. He could sell you anything. He could convince you. He could get you to see his side. And I watched that growing up. Now I'll tell you, I was a shy kid growing up. I would sit outside and watch the kids play, and I'd want to go outside and I'd just stare at them. And you put a microphone in front of me, I would cry when I was younger. So I had this fear of being in front of people my entire life, but I had two wonderful women that just forced me to do it. So I would talk and cry and sing with tears coming down my eyes. And I just watched my dad as he would preach, to people, and he would, interact with the crowd. And I'm like, as I grew, I grew into this. I tell people that talking for me is a gift. I'm grateful to God for that gift, because I know everyone doesn't have it, and some people can't get up in front of people and talk, but I could talk for hours. And so I get it wholeheartedly from my dad. My mom is not a talker. My kids, one is, one isn't. And so I absolutely love talking. So it's just something that as I watched him and I just seen how he did things, and I always also watch other people, any show or anything where people are talking. I just kind of watch, because I think you can really tell about a person when they talk. We know if someone is really jiving us, or if they're like sincere and they mean it, and it's in their conversation, and that's something that you can't fake. So I tell people when I talk, you'll hear it in my voice. Hopefully you hear the passion. Hopefully you hear me being sincere when we have a conversation. And so yeah, my dad's been the best at it. And if you ever see him preach, he just does something amazing that draws you in. And that's the same thing I want to do with people when I have conversation.
How does he do that? How does he draw somebody in? And how have you maybe used that? Because everything I've seen from you, it's I turn on the tablet or I turn on the computer, and I've watched some of your stuff, and I can't turn it off.
Well, I think, for us first, we are very grounded in our faith. So I always have to bring my faith into the discussion when I talk. It's lots of prayer. It's lots of really, knowing who I am and being very confident and secure about who I am as well. And knowing that, when I speak, I can always tell there's a point for him, I think that happens as well, but for me, that I get to going and I get a little bit more passionate because my voice gets a little bit stronger. Almost sounds like I'm yelling at you, but I'm really not. It's just like now I'm really gravitating to the things that I'm talking about. And so it just, for me, I pray every time before I speak. I really ask for, Holy Spirit, give me the right words to say, speak for me. There's sometimes, and most times, people will say, well, what did you say after you spoke? I have no clue, because I don't go in with a script. I don't go in with this thoughts or ideas of what I'm going to say. I just pray for the guidance to just lead me. My dad does the exact same thing. He doesn't get up on a Sunday without having a prayer that just says, let me say the right things. And, for both of us, if we can just touch one person with the things that we've said, we've done something great. And so I think that's where I get it from. I just really am grounded in my faith, and I want to make sure, that I'm saying the right things. And I'm really a huge reflector on the things that I say. So, even after conversations, I'll even ask people, did that sound okay? Did it work for you? Should I have said something different? But yeah, I pray a lot before it. And even in my mind, while I'm continuing to talk, it's just like, help me speak to say the right words, because I know that words matter. And we have to be very mindful of what we say to people, because, when you're in this space, you kind of got one time to get it right. And you want to make sure you make the most of it.
And you don't want to miss out on that opportunity, because sometimes, just us sitting here today, I don't want to miss out on an opportunity to learn something or to catch somebody's attention that may be listening. So it's impressive that you're able to find that faith that it will land with somebody at some point.
Yeah.
I'm interested in, you kind of gave us a little insight there. I'm interested in hearing what it was like growing up in a household where your father is a pastor, mm-hmm. a journalist, and in his own right, an activist.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty cool growing up in my household. My dad was very committed, to the community in which he serves. He always has been. There were a lot of times I can remember growing up, he may not have, always wake up every day as dad right there, but I can tell you what, he never missed anything that we did. If there was a play, he was there. We might know he's the man in the back nodding off, but he was always present and he was always there. He never missed anything that we did growing up, which was beautiful, because he was very busy. I have a lot of my father's traits. When he puts his all to things, he commits to them. He did, being the shoe salesman and was manager at several stores, and he was committed to that. He shifted from that into getting into the church, and then going to Bible college and becoming a pastor. And he gives his all still to that to this day. You need someone to pray for you, visit at the hospital, talk to whomever in your family. Like, he's always made himself readily available for people. And I get that from him wholeheartedly. And so I think the beauty of it was that he just taught me that no matter what goes on in your world, your family comes first, God first, family next. But that's what I watched my father always do. And it's something that I've always instilled in myself. And so it's been a beautiful thing just being able to watch him as I've grown. The beautiful thing is we all live in the same home together. So I still continue to get to have these really great conversations with him, about things that are going on, and we can have some great discussions. And I watch him still move in this community. He's kind of come out of the limelight a little bit. He's like, supportive of what I do. And so he, this is yours. I'm here if you need help, but I'm focusing on other things. And so just to kind of watch the evolution of your parents, and for me, for my dad especially, just watching him, grow. But the one thing he never did was he never left us out of the picture. When he was doing the Communicator newspaper, we would get up in the middle of the night and go with him. So if it was something he had to do in the middle of the night, come on, I need my family. And we'd go to the office and we'd sleep there and, wake up the next day and he'd have the paper done. And I just watched his commitment, to what he does. And I think that's, for me, is I do my very best to stay committed to what I do. But I just love the fact that he never allowed the things that he did to impact him as being our father and, impact him as even being a husband.
Yeah, I can't imagine what kind of impact that had on you, not only as a child, but growing up and then getting into the world that you've gotten into. I did want to touch on the Communicator.
Yes.
And we haven't even mentioned your father's name's Roderick Bradley.
Yes.
And so a little shout out to him. And
yes.
So he was one of the first owners of the Communicator, which is the first Black-owned and operated newspaper in the state of Iowa.
Yes.
That's quite the undertaking.
It is quite the undertaking. So the beautiful thing was, before it was the Communicator, it was the Iowa Bystander. And I always tell people, first African-American publication, largest this side of the Mississippi. And he was able to take on the Communicator newspaper for quite some time before passing it on to Jonathan Narcisse. But the beautiful part about that was we're both in the same boat now. We're not journalists per se. We just had a passion about making sure that the community was kept informed, with things that were going on within our own community and just things that you needed to watch out for. So watching him do the Communicator, knowing that, he didn't have any experience at that time. I don't think he had even been to college. He had his high school diploma and that was it. But he worked with all of the right people that could make the Communicator what it was. And so I just remember, watching him pour his heart into that and, cranking out those publications, when they came out, and he really enjoyed that part of his life. And so it was amazing to watch him, with little experience, produce something that the community was just proud of, because it was something that when you opened it up, you seen people that looked like you, and it was absolutely amazing.
Okay, so I did not realize that the Communicator was previously the Bystander. I knew there
Yes.
was the Bystander, but I did not realize it was the same publication, just different names.
Yes.
So could you give us a little background on both those publications and maybe how it got into your father's direction and what exactly it is?
Yeah, so Iowa Bystander has been around forever. I mean, it's unfortunate we don't have some of this rich history now, but we had the Bystander, and when my dad went into this and bought it, it was do we keep it the Iowa Bystander? Do we make some shifts and changes? But he worked on really thinking about what that was going to be about. And the beautiful thing about the Bystander, which still happened with the Communicator, was it was Black news. It was what was going on right in our community, what was going on in the state of Iowa. We were uplifting Blacks at that time, from if it was something going on up at Goods Park to, our leaders in the community, all of those things you would find in there, from Black-owned businesses and places to support, or when you should show up for the latest meeting that's going on, or all things church, would be in there. All of those things didn't change, even though, there was the Communicator. And my dad just wholeheartedly wanted to uplift, of course, the things that were in the Bystander. That just transferred right well into the Communicator newspaper, and he didn't miss a beat, and he just enjoyed it. And the nice thing was, some of the names are failing me now, but I know that the owner of where Iowa Bystander started, even with his family, my dad was close with members of the family. And so we're able to, have those conversations, look at it. My dad, has a really great eye for if things were off or if it was right or how we presented it. And he was really careful about what presentation looked like, when we put that out there. But that was something for him that, it worked effortlessly for him. And I know there was probably tons of things he went through, in creating the publication and making sure that it got out to people. But he did such an amazing job with it that, it was just something that, couldn't be replaced for what he did in the time that he had it until, it exchanged ownership. But he did an amazing job with what he had.
It's incredible. So the publication has basically been a few different names. It's gone from the Communicator to the Bystander, and then the Urban Experience, essentially the same type of publication, which started in the late 1800s and has always been just laced with positivity. I mean, that was one thing that really popped out to me. Mm-hmm. Why is it so important to continue that aspect of it, the positive aspect of it?
The positiveness is for me what drew me to it. So when my dad asked about let's do this magazine, I thought, well, you got to be kidding me because I don't even know to begin what we're going to do. But the one thing that I knew that I wanted to do was create a space where we could be uplifted, where we could have some really heart-to-heart conversations, where we could bring up thoughts and ideas and opinions without it being this negative tone type of thing, for so many reasons. And I've said this, African Americans in mainstream media, unfortunately, we're hearing, it was the shooting, it was the robbery, it was, you name it, it was the police. And, and that stuff becomes depressing. I know for me, I can't watch a lot of news because I internalize that. When you see those images over and over again, it starts to do something within your brain that starts to impact your own mental wellness. So for me, I had to kind of shut off the TV a little bit and focus on what could we create that, we could uplift and talk about, hey, don't forget to go to this meeting here. Or don't forget this organization is doing that. Or, hey, let's have a conversation about your health. Hey, have you seen this Black artist and look at their artwork that they do? Like, to me, this publication, Urban Experience Magazine, it brings me joy because we won't put those kinds of articles, in our space. They're meant for other places, and that's perfectly fine. But we want to be able to uplift our community. We want you to support Black-owned businesses. We want you to take care of your health. We want you to know what's going on, with your children's education. We want you to know what's going on in our culture. We want you to know what's going on in public affairs. But we do that in a way to where we're not, making one feel bad for who they are. And so that's the beautiful part about everything that we've done, from, even with the Iowa Bystander, when it started early on and we didn't have our fingers on it, but when we had the imprint of the Communicator newspaper, that was something that my dad really was passionate about, is making sure we uplifted. He didn't want to put that other stuff out there. And it's the same thing that really got passed down to me, is to make sure that our articles that are submitted, one, allow people who look like me's voices to be heard, but also that we're uplifting our community at the same time. And positive makes a difference, because when people see that publication, they go, wow, I see someone who looks like me. Oh, they're talking about something that impacts me, but gosh, it's making me look pretty darn good. And that's exactly what we want every time someone looks at the magazine.
I love the story about how you basically revamped and started the Urban Experience. Your dad came to you and said, it's time for you to quit your day job and start this up. How did that happen? And so you're a teacher at the time, correct?
Yes.
So you were a teacher for 7 years, and then you get into this publication. I mean, were you looking for a change at that time, or kind of how did it come about?
No, I weren't. I tell people this, we were actually coming out of a very dark time. So my kids had lost their father at that time. So we were really not in the best place, I would say, the three of us, really working through that and trying to deal with that. My kids were young at the time, so really trying to be the parent to support them through that. And about a month later, it says 2014, he comes and he's like, yeah, in November, he said, yeah, I'm thinking about this magazine. And I'm like, what are you telling me for? Because I'm like, I am in the middle of, I'm a single parent, 2 kids. I've got a really great paying job. It pays for our health insurance. I'm feeling really good about the space that I'm in. I've gone to school. I've gotten a few degrees under my belt. So I'm like, yeah, no, thank you. I'm just really, that's my attitude towards it. And then all of a sudden I started thinking on it a little bit more, and I'm like, this could really work. Like, I remember watching him do the Communicator, and I'm like, and I told him, I said, if I do this, I said, I'm not going back to school to learn how to be a journalist. I said, I've got enough degrees. And so then me and my sister, she started getting into it, and we're sitting at home one day, literally, and we're just like shooting out names, and we're calling out all kinds of different names. What about this? What about that? And then all of a sudden my sister goes, the Des Moines Urban Experience. And, every time you read the magazine, you're going to have some type of experience. And I'm like, yeah, that's it. I'm like, that's it. We're the Des Moines Urban Experience. So my dad is excited because, he's a visionary. So he's thinking, I want to do something so that when I retire, I still have something to do. Everyone wants something to do in retirement. And so he's thinking kind of that visionary thinking. And so he goes, great, we're going to put this magazine together. And so we knew nothing about nothing. So we introduced Publisher to him because I was like, I don't know how we're going to start. Let's try Publisher. And he was like, what is this? This is great. I wish I would have had this back in the day. Knowing good and well there were other things as we went along. Publisher is great, but not really to always do the publication. But that's how we started. We got articles from people, submission-based, and we started in the churches. It made sense because, he was a pastor and we had already made those connections. So he literally would lay the magazine out on Publisher. We would go and get a few printed, and we'd start putting them in the churches. It was the safest place for us to go because the people knew us and they trusted, we're going to give them a great product. So we started there, and then we just kind of grew out of that space. But we had our humble beginnings in churches, printing copies, riding around town, delivering them, dropping them off. Saturdays would come, and I'd be like, it's like, who's delivering them today? And I'm like, your turn. We switched up and took turns, and that's how we got things started. And then, as we continued to grow, so we put out our first publication in February of 2015, and we've been going ever since. But I will tell you, starting off, I was not passionate about the thing. I was just like, this is labor. I wasn't talking to labor of love. I was like, I don't know if I really want to do this, but I really wanted to make my father proud. He had done all of this before. So really, when I started in the beginning, I'm very transparent about that. My heart was not in it. I was juggling, single parent, also working for a school district, and then, trying to do this. And then, fast forward 9 months later, I get custodianship of Juneteenth. So I'm teaching magazine Juneteenth. And eventually, I had to let something go. And I made the really tough decision to leave the district. I had to, and ended up resigning from the district in June of 2016.
It wasn't the end of your time in the district, but we'll get to that in a second. So you go to Iowa State, you get your bachelor's degree in education, and then from there you go on to Drake and get a master's. You have all this education, and then you're putting it into something that's not in that field. It just doesn't make sense in the the world that we live in. Like, you go to school, you go to college, you work the job that you went to college for. What was all that kind of grappling with that like for you?
Yeah, that was really hard because, in my mind, I was going to go to school. I was going to work as a teacher. And I went very quickly back to Drake to get my ed specialist so I could be an EDS. I'm like, I'm going to be an educational specialist. I'm going to become a dean of students. I'm going to be a principal. And then maybe I'll just be a superintendent someday, So I kind of had the educational path lined up. That's what I had poured my heart into. It's exactly what I knew I wanted to do. So this threw everything off. And I had lots of conversations with God about, what are you doing? Because I had my plans set. And there's always a Bible verse that says that, I know the plans I have for you, not to hurt you, not to harm you, but to give you a hope and a bright future. And I had to say that to myself lots of times. And what happened is I ended up having a shift in thinking that while I didn't go into the path that I thought I needed to go to, you're always educating people no matter what. I'm just doing it in a different way. I'm not sitting in a classroom, working with my students and building those relationships. But I was like, the Lord kind of gave me my educational opportunity in this entire city and this state, and maybe even beyond, because I'm having conversations, through the magazine, through Juneteenth, with people I would have never imagined that I would have done that before. And so I always say God has a funny sense of humor, because I'm like, yeah, you knew what the plans were, but I had to get on board, with what your plans were for me. And it's been absolutely amazing. Like, I love everything that I do, but now I just look at it as I tell people, I always call myself still a teacher. No, I'm a teacher. I'm just not the teacher in the classroom that you think of, but I'm the teacher in all of the different places that I touch.
My wife's family has a saying that if you ever want to make God laugh, tell him your plans, because it never goes that way. And you probably never anticipated doing a podcast in somebody's front office one day, and here we are.
We are.
It is a winding road, but always an interesting one for that. With some of that work, when it comes to you're leaving your educational background behind. I guess before that, why did you want to be a teacher? Was it, it is kind of in the same realm as what you're doing now, but I don't know, it's maybe not directly the same thing.
Yeah, I wanted to be a teacher because I wanted to make an imprint and an impact on students' lives. I loved the idea of coming in each day, and I always tell people, depending on the building I'm in, I have 300 kids. I have 600 kids now. I have 750 kids, depending on the building I was in, because I looked at the students really as my family. I woke up each day wanting to be in their space and learn about their life and what's going on, and be there to support them in any way that I could. Whatever they needed, I wanted to be that for them. And also, I wanted to be, a Black woman going into a place to impact Black kids that look like me. There's nothing greater than, you're in a classroom and you see this Black lady, this Black man, whomever it is, come walk in the room, and it speaks volumes. And so I was always big on relationship building. And I would always tell people, yeah, teachers, I'm here for you, but I crave being there for the kids. That was my complete and total passion, was just the kids and how I could help in their educational process. I loved watching the child who didn't get it, and all of a sudden the next day the light goes off in their brain, and you get to be a part of that. You get to be a part of creating a wonderful educational journey for students, and that's what I absolutely love. I've watched kids who I've taught who have now graduated, and to just see that is such amazing, to know that while I didn't walk with them every step of the way, I had a piece of their journey. And so that's the part about teaching that just spoke to me, and I wanted to be a part of making that impact, but also, doing all I could for the children that I reached.
I love the symmetry between how you said you were a teacher because you wanted to be a good influence, a Black woman in a space with other Black kids that could look up to you as a leader and look up to you. And then even though you close that chapter, now you have a publication that when kids or anybody opens up, they can see people that look like them having positive experiences. So they're not the same thing, but they're not too dissimilar.
No, they're really one and the same, just a little bit, because now I still get to make an impact. I can take even some of their writings and, put things in the magazine, and I can tell some of their stories now and put those things in the magazine. And so that's the beauty of it, is it's just really like I've just shifted over to something different, but I still haven't stopped providing education and making an impact on people.
The Des Moines Public School District is by far the most diverse school district in central Iowa. You probably know the statistic, probably the entire state.
Yes.
So kind of with that, is there a reason is that the reason you went to the Des Moines Public School District?
Yeah, I was raised in the Des Moines Public School system. So, I did my elementary experience in Des Moines. I remember being at Longfellow School. It's now called Carver. I remember my principal was Black, Barbara Williams. I remember seeing her. I remember my 2nd and 4th grade teacher, Mrs. McNear, Black woman. I remember my 1st grade teacher, Mrs. Kropp. Like, these are people I'll never forget, because when I opened the door and seen them, it was just like, wow. Like, they're running schools, they're leading the cause, and it's those women who made such an impact on me that when I had the opportunity and I was living here, I'm a native of Des Moines, so it's the only place I've ever known, born and raised here, lived here my whole life. It was a no-brainer for me to be able to be in Des Moines Public Schools District, because I remember those women, and I may not remember every teacher I had, but I remember those teachers that looked like me and the impact they made on me, and I wanted to be able to do the same things for others.
Now you're on the Des Moines Public School Board. You are the senior ambassador for Drake's John D. Bright College. You are the executive director of Iowa's Juneteenth, which you touched on a little bit ago. But if you were still teaching, could you be doing all of this stuff, making this wide range of an impact?
No, I don't think so. Teaching, as much as I love it, you're in a box, and I'll say that very loosely. But your reach is probably within the building that you serve in, maybe within the district that you serve as well. But you're kind of, whatever your specialty is, that's what you do. For me, it was reading interventionist, and I caught on pretty early that that's probably where I was going to be. And I spent 7 years doing that exact thing. And so, no, it would have been very challenging. I don't believe the reach would have been as great. And resigning was because I knew I could not juggle all of those things and give them my all, and just had to focus on the work that I'm doing now.
We'll get to some of the Juneteenth celebration here in a little bit, but first I want to talk about like your newest title, which kind of connects back to this podcast here on the Drake Sports Media Podcast Network. So you were asked to be a senior ambassador for the brand new John D. Bright College, which is at Drake. It's a 2-year school focused on professional preparation. So it's employee leadership, workplace communication, creative problem solving. What was your initial thought when they asked you to come on board as a senior ambassador?
Well, first I'm like, senior ambassador, like,
what is that?
What is I know. What am I going to be doing anyway? It's like, what kind of title are you giving me here? But no, it was wonderful because, I wouldn't have been able to know what it was like to be a Drake student had I have not attended Drake. And my experience for every degree I got at Drake was amazing, from the professors that I worked with, from the students that I was around. It was absolutely amazing. And I've had a chance to have a conversation with Marty Martin. Love his heart and his passion. I know he doesn't like to be in the limelight all the time, but he does such amazing things for the community. And probably there's so many things he has his hand on that people don't know, because that's not the person that he is. He doesn't want you to know. But I think knowing that those experiences that I've had, having the conversations with Craig Owens about all of this as well, it was very easy for me to say yes, because I remember before I even got approached to do this, I remember knowing that this was happening. I'm on the advisory board at Drake, and what I loved was the 2-year thing. And I loved the fact that students who look like me could come to Drake for a couple years. I've told people Drake's expensive, and you want to be able to give kids the opportunity to come to this place if they want, especially when it's right in their backyard, And so the one thing that got me was like, wow, 2 years at Drake, and then you can go on to be, whatever that is. And I thought that was amazing. And I knew it was something when I was asked, it was very easy. I didn't have to think about it. I just said, yeah, let's do it, because I wholeheartedly believed in the vision of all of this. I had a wonderful opportunity to meet the Bright family, when they were here, amazing women that I, got to talk to, and just hearing their excitement about it, I just knew it was the right thing for me to do, because I really wholeheartedly believe in the work that Drake is doing, and also being able to provide an affordable path for students. It's hard, when you're going to school and you don't know how things are going to be paid for, but, everyone's doing their best to provide our students with a way to attend Bright College and hardly not have to pay, too much or nothing at all out of pocket.
The fact that you hardly had any hesitation, I mean, it sounds like you had no hesitation in your voice So that, I don't want to put words in your mouth here, but it lends to the fact that you had a really good experience at Drake. What was your experience, especially being a black woman at a predominantly white university? What was your experience like?
That's been my entire life. So I will tell you that I graduated from Valley High School, did my freshman year at Ankeny High School, lived in Ankeny for 7 years. So I've been very used to that. Those were spaces that my father put me in, spaces I didn't think I was going to be in, and question why. He would put me in those spaces. Even when we moved back to Des Moines, I thought I was going to go to Roosevelt, and he said, "Oh, just want you to know you're going to Valley." And I'm like, what do you keep putting me, in these spaces for? But I tell you what, it's because of those spaces that I'm able to thrive and achieve in those spaces. So being at Drake was not anything that was, intimidating for me or, made me feel any certain kind of way, because one, I spoke up for myself a lot. But two, I got a chance to meet and know my professors on personal levels. I've had professors that have invited our whole class to, to their homes. And these are things that we don't talk about a lot, but we have professors at Drake that really care about the students that cross their paths and come into their doors. And so knowing that I had that kind of experience, I've had times I've had to take my kids to class with me, and the professor's like, "Oh yeah, seat's right over there." It's those kinds of things that, you want, that people make you feel warm and welcome. There was not a time at Drake where I felt like I did not belong. And so I want to make sure that I speak up for that and tell those stories and let people know that it will be a place where you belong. It will be a place that you will have the help that you need. And I'm hoping that when people see someone who looks like me and says, "Well, she went to Drake, and okay, she's got her master's in literacy and her specialist in administration, and she, she did that, I can do the same thing." And so that's, for me, what speaks volumes. And I didn't have any hesitancy, because I knew my experience was my reality. And it's one of the reasons I love Drake. And it's one of the reasons I will continue to do all I can to speak up for the university, because I had a wonderful experience. And I want others who look like me to be able to have that experience as well.
There's some firepower within the BIPOC community at Drake University now. Wayne, you, Lewis Carr now there. That's an impressive group of folks.
I'm telling you, I am grateful to be among some great individuals. Wayne is a dear friend of mine, and, he is very passionate about what he does and how he does things. And, him being able to speak up. Lewis Carr, I got to meet when he was a speaker at one of our banquets for Juneteenth, and he's an amazing media powerhouse. And so being able to just know, it just cracks me up. Like when you say my name and then their names right in the same line. People, once you really know my story, it cracks me up, because I'm like, yeah, and he just said my name too. So it's just amazing. And I love being in that company, because those men are amazing men who have done great things for the communities in which they serve. And, and we will continue to talk about our experiences as, being at Drake. And I know all of our experiences are a little different based on the times, but one thing that we've all come back to is that we love this university, and we want to be able to lend our voice and our help to, draw those who look like us into the space as well.
Kind of switching gears a little bit to maybe something we talked about at the beginning, and that's the conversation piece. And recently you kind of jumped into, I don't want to say like a viral video or anything like that, but recently you were interviewed by one of my former colleagues, Dave Price. Yes. And that interview, 10, 15 minutes long, a lot of good information. But in there, one piece really stood out. It was a line where you said that you fear for your son's life each time he leaves the house. And you said that was the first time you had revealed that publicly. So you said you sometimes go back and evaluate the things you say. I want to give you the opportunity here on an open mic. Now that you have said that, seen the reactions, how has that kind of hit with you now that we sit here a couple months later?
Yeah, one, I try not to look at the reactions very often. If I look at what everyone says to me, it will seep into my spirit and start to get into my brain, and it'll make me think things and rethink things. So I try not to really get into that, because what I know about those people that made those comments is they're not me. They never will be me, and they will probably, I'll be safe to say, never experience what I've gone through. So I say this on a mic that I don't take the comments of others. I let them roll off of me. Being on the school board has taught me that very quickly, is that you will always have people that will disagree with you. But until you lived my life and had my own life experiences, I've been stopped by police when I was younger. Not a great experience. Every time I see a blue light come on, I'm almost close to, I feel like what a heart attack could be. My heart just jumps. And because I've seen those images on TV of people who remind me of my son, I'll wholeheartedly stick by my statement. And I don't feel bad for saying it out loud. Actually, it brought me some peace, actually, being able to say that out loud, because I've held it in for a very long time for one of the reasons of not knowing what people's reactions would be. But it's my true reality. And until you actually are in my skin and have lived my experiences, while I value and appreciate everyone's thoughts and opinions, I was not moved by those and never questioned myself about making that statement, because I do feel that way. He just turned 16 on Monday. And so now he has the keys to drive all by himself. He doesn't need me anymore. And it still terrifies me because I know my son. I know how he would respond to things, and I know how he acts. I have several conversations, not just with him, but I've had to tell some of his friends, when he's with you, you protect him. You speak up for him. Because sometimes I don't know what the person is thinking when y'all get stopped. They could be coming after him. And I get really bothered by people who don't understand that. And the reason why they don't understand is because they've never experienced it. And so I have a really true fear that, honestly, at the end of the day, as my dad would tell me, I have to put it in God's hands. And I have to trust that he's covering my son every time he goes somewhere. But it's my reality. It's my truth. It's the way that I feel. And it might never go away. But I do have to give it to God and say, he's yours before he's mine. And so I'm going to trust that he's going to be okay. But no, it's a very real reality. And that's not just me. There's tons of women, Black women who look like me, who feel the same way about their sons. But sometimes we get nervous to say those things because of the responses I got. And I read a couple of them and just told my daughter, I don't want to see any more, because I can't accept that from people because they've never lived my life.
Appreciate you sharing that, first off. There is that harsh reality within what you just said there, is that there are people that just don't get it. They have not even given the opportunity to understand the life that is lived by others. So there are those thoughts out there. Yeah. You mentioned that you know how your son acts. You know how he behaves. So for people out there that believe, all right, well, if he just, follows a straight and narrow line and doesn't do anything wrong, it shouldn't be an issue, right? What would you say to that?
Those are some of the comments, that I got. And when I say, I want to preface, and my son's probably going to be embarrassed because he never likes me, talking about him in this space. But when I talk about how I know how my son acts and behaves, I know that my son, that if something like that happens to him, the first person he's going to want to talk to is his mom. Mom, what do I do? What should I say? How should I act? So I say that even if he does everything right, what if he grabs his cell phone and the officer thinks it's something else? It's happened. And then his life is in jeopardy. What if he bends down because he dropped something? Maybe he dropped his ID. Like, people don't think about those things, and those things are real because I know those kinds of things happen. And so he can do everything right, and something could still happen. And I'm not saying that's because every police officer in the world is bad. I'm just saying because we're human beings. And people are scared. The officer's scared, whether they want to admit it or not, and so is the driver. And so you're dealing with two people who are nervous, and each one has seen images of different things. So how are they going to react? So I always tell people that's very easy to say. And I've taught my son to follow the directions. You get stopped by the officer, you find your nearest place and pull over. You put your hazard lights on. You put your hand on the wheel. You answer the questions. Yes, sir. No, ma'am. You answer those questions. You look them in the eye. All these conversational pieces we've had, but when we're not there and you teach your kid everything, ask ask that from women who have lost their sons, who said, I taught them everything right. Like I told them what to do, and this still happened. So I have a hard time digesting that of just tell your son what to do. We have those conversations all the time. Don't put your hood on while you're driving in the car. Keep it down. He loves his music. Don't play your music so loud. You don't want to draw attention to you. Let's make sure all your lights are in place, even that license plate light, to make sure you don't have a reason to get stopped. Like, you do all of those right things, and sometimes people still find a reason to stop you. And sometimes it's because of the color of your skin, and we don't want to admit that because we hate to think that people think that way, but they do. And so for people who say that, I share this with my son all the time. I still have to be concerned that something could happen to him.
This reminds me a little bit of kind of the reckoning or just, thoughts that I had, back when George Floyd was murdered, and just some of these conversations were brought up, and it was the cop speech that every black parent has with their son or daughter. And I started kind of thinking about my upbringing, and yes, there were conversations about, respect and all those things, but I don't know if I recall like the conversation of how you're supposed to act when you're pulled over, about your hands on the wheel and hat on a certain way. That just never happened in my life. And so that's just one example of differences. And yeah, I was just kind of wondering maybe how hearing that lands with you. I'm sure it's not something you've never heard before.
Well, no, and it's the same for me.
Yeah.
Growing up, we didn't have to, my parents didn't have conversations about what you do if you get stopped by the police. Never once. We didn't have to worry about that. I mean, literally, we drove around. I got my license. It was great. My parents, if they were concerned, they didn't voice that to me.
Yeah.
We were fine. I didn't have those kinds of conversations either growing up. So that's why it's so weird. And I have to tell my son, like, it's strange that I have to have these conversations with you. I said, because growing up, I didn't have to have them. I don't even think I had to have them with my daughter. It just seems like recently now more you have to have these conversations. And so I have to tell him, like, these are things I never thought I'd have to share with you when it comes to the police. And it's crazy. I have an uncle who just retired from being an officer. And so having these conversations, it feels really strange because I feel like I shouldn't have to tell you that you can't put your hood on in the car because it might draw attention. I mean, I shouldn't have to tell you that you're going to get stopped because maybe the light on your license plate went out for all of a sudden. So yeah, it's really weird for me and off because I didn't grow up with those conversations. And so I feel bad having them for my son, because then also what that does is it creates another level of anxiety for him. Now, Mom, I get stopped. Mom's told me all of these things. What am I supposed to do? So, we're having these conversations. I'll say I don't want to say we to put anyone else there, but I'm having these conversations with my son, which now creates a whole nother level of anxiety for him, that it's like, okay, now I've got to be mindful of this, and I've got to, be taking care of that. And so I feel bad because I'm putting more on him than I should have to be. He's a teenage boy, 16 years old. We all know, folks know what it's like to be a teenager. It should be something that's enjoying instead of him having to be mindful of, okay, I got stopped by the police. Okay, I'm going to put my hands on the wheels just because, unless the officer says take them off, then I'll take them off. We shouldn't have to be doing that. And as much as people don't want to, have those conversations or say, oh, you're making it up, we've got it in proof and in living color. It happens. It happened to George Floyd. He wasn't doing anything that was like out of the ordinary. He was fine, and someone put their knee on his neck and he died because you thought he was still a threat. It's those things. And we have to have those conversations. I have to have those conversations with my son. They're not fun, but they're necessary.
We've come a long way in this conversation,
yes.
And I appreciate all your time so far. I did want to kind of end it with just a few things, a few more questions, and kind of revolving around what actually got us together, and that's the fact that Juneteenth is right around the corner. And how long have you been the executive director of Iowa's Juneteenth?
So I've been doing Juneteenth this is year 6. We're 31 years of celebrating here in Iowa and Des Moines, but we're year 6 here in Des Moines for me.
When it comes to celebrating this moment in history, how do you reflect on it?
So I always take the opportunity to reflect on it from my past and my present and my future. I tell people all the time with Juneteenth, let's take a moment to recognize the past. We know what the past was for Blacks. We know where we've come from. Where are we at where we were, from the beginning of time? No. Where are we at presently? There's still some issues. So what are we going to do to help be a part of making sure our future is bright, not only for us, but for our children and for generations to come? And that's just one thing for me I reflect over all the time. I watch lots of videos to remind me, of where I came from and being mindful of that. We should never forget the past. I don't want to live in it, but I also want to be mindful of the struggles that people who look like me went through to get some of the rights that I have today. But then I also want to take a moment to say, okay, so now since then, here we are, and we've still got some things going on that, things aren't great, but they're not horrible, but they could be better. And so now we have an opportunity to talk about, well, what does it look like to create a better future for us and generations to come? And I encourage that for people. It's something that I think is important when we celebrate Juneteenth, is that we always remember, we focus on where we are, but man, we need to start thinking about where we're going.
What is is there a specific topic or theme this year that you guys are really trying to, organizers are trying to really hit home?
Yeah, so this year our theme is a family affair, bringing the family back together again. We've had all this time away from each other. Huh? Yeah, we do. And family is so important, in all communities. I'll say in our community, but in all communities, family is something, where you get your learnings from. It's where your foundation is laid. It's where it kind of creates who you are. And there's some things from your family you like, and there's some things from your family you don't like. And so you pick and kind of choose what that means your family is going to look like. And so when we talk about it being a family affair, it's everyone that's involved with Juneteenth is a part of our family, from our sponsors, from our people, who attend our events, from people whom I talk to. Like, everyone's a part of this family, and we want us to all come together and celebrate, African American culture, but we also want you a part of that conversation as well. So we this year are focusing on family and it being a family affair.
How can people get involved? I know it's a week-long celebration. Yes. This will be posted kind of in the middle of the celebration. So what can people do as we get closer to the weekend?
Yes. So actually, June 19th is Juneteenth Day. We're going to have a wonderful Neighbors Day celebration downtown at Western Gateway Park that I'm encouraging, individuals to come to. We're going to have music all day long in that park from 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. You're going to see people on the stage who look like me that will be showcasing all genres of music, which is I'm so excited about, because it gives, people the opportunity. During COVID, performances weren't happening and people were in, and we're still canceling some of the music festivals. So it'd be nice to have individuals on the stage. You'll have vendors that are going to be around. Black-owned businesses will be there, for you to purchase some things from. And then we have Manifestival, which is an arm of Capital City Pride. They're going to be highlighting artists of color there. So we're going to have quite a bit going on. Bottle and Bottega is going to create a community mural. So come down and paint that and help us create this large community mural that your handprint or your brush stroke could be on. So we want you to do that. So we're really looking forward to that. That's our larger event. In the 17th, we're going to have our Community Builders Banquet at Drake University, and we're excited. Drake's always been a sponsor of Juneteenth, and we're going to recognize people in the state of Iowa for the work that they're doing, and our essay contest winners.
Fantastic. All right, so we've had a really good conversation. You've touched on so much, but what, as we kind of wrap things up, what would you like to see out of the Des Moines community moving forward? Is there one big dream or a few small?
Yeah, I think I want us all to talk to each other more, and not judge people off of their actions, but understand the why behind what they're doing, from rather it's protesting to rather it's, writing that article, rather it's calling someone out, if it's calling someone in, if it's taking a stance. We just need to have these conversations to understand the why and stop making assumptions about people. At the end of the day, I know there's Black, there's white, there's Asian, there's all these different labels we give. There's Democrat, there's Republican, there's independent, there's the executive, there's the president, there's the custodian. But at the end of the day, the one thing we have in common is that we're people. Like, we are absolutely 100% people who want great things, who want our families to be successful, who want our kids to succeed. We all want some of those same things we have in common. But for some reason, we've taken every label that we carry, and that's how we identify. And I would really love our community to get past that and start looking at people like people and just listening to them and respecting them and learning about their realities instead of automatically saying they're wrong because of the label that they carry. And that's a big ask, and it's going to take a lot of work, but I'm very passionate about just getting to know people where they are and understanding who they are, and not be concerned if I'm sitting across from a Democrat, Republican, Independent, Black, white, whoever. I don't care who I'm across the table from. We're people, and there's always something that we can find that we can have in common. We need to take those commonalities and find a way to make the impact on the community in which we serve.
That is how you put a punctuation on a fantastic conversation. Dwana, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Dwana did it. That conversation was so much fun. I cannot stop smiling. I hope her positivity shined through, and I hope that you all were able to take away from her as much as I did. Now, I do have a couple challenges for our listeners. If you enjoyed that conversation, please share it to your friends. Share it on social media. Help us get the word out. If you want more conversations like those, please subscribe to the Drake Sports Media Podcast Network. And finally, come out to the Neighbors Day celebration at Western Gateway Park in downtown Des Moines on June 19th. It starts at 11 a.m. and goes until 11 p.m. This podcast was recorded on the traditional land of the Iowa, Sauk, Meskwaki, and Sioux. Thanks again to Dwana Bradley for being our guest. I'm Michael Admire. Until next time, remember, we may come from different backgrounds, races, genders, religions, but here, we're all one.